Hi, this is Emily Kinzel, and I'm going to spend the next few minutes discussing some of the principles of communities of practice in an effort to help you understand how communities of practice might be applied to mlearning. This presentation will include terms and models. I will explain both of those. I'll also discuss factors that have been found to influence the effectiveness of communities of practice. Then we'll look at some implications for the application of communities of practice to mlearning, followed by future research topics and questions that are raised by the empirical evidence that I looked at as I prepared this mini presentation. Finally, I'll ask you a couple of questions to get you thinking about how might communities of practice be integrated into mlearning solutions. First of all, communities of practice fall under the umbrella of constructivism. Constructivism is a learning theory that is based on the idea that knowledge is constructed by learners. It's not something that they passively absorb. And not only do they construct knowledge individually, but this knowledge construction also happens in a social setting. It is influenced by the people that they interact with, the words that they speak with them, what they see happening as the knowledge is constructed. There's a constant interplay between experience and learning in the constructivist theory of learning. Communities of practice are special in many ways. What makes them unique is that they are, first of all, a group of people who come together with a very specific common interest. They're not just a random group that forms on Facebook because they happen to be on there discussing recipes. They have specific learning goals, and it usually includes a lot of dialogue and interaction as a means to creating knowledge both for the individuals and for the group as a whole. The final thing that is special about communities of practice is the idea of distributive cognition. In this principle, it is understood that knowledge is held not only by individuals, but it is distributed across all those individuals' environments, the artifacts they create, the tools that they use. Knowledge belongs to the group, not just the individual. Communities of practice, which I'll refer to from here on out as COPs, all contain structural elements. There are three of them: the domain, the community, and the practice. When these three elements function well together, they make a COP an ideal knowledge structure, a social structure that can assume responsibility for developing and sharing knowledge. In COPs, members have varying levels of expertise. It is a long-term endeavor. It doesn't happen in just days or weeks. And learning is central. This is an interesting notion because it cannot be designed in a traditional sense. Rather, the social infrastructure that supports the COP is designed. When thinking about COPs as they apply to mlearning, one might think, just design a virtual community of practice, a virtual space where members meet, exchange experiences, and work collaboratively to create a spirit of community. Here's a model that IBM created to electronically facilitate a community of practice. You can see the elements that they included to create common identity, tools that nurture the social aspect of learning, and ways to capture the knowledge through particular frameworks as it's being created. In another model, of a virtual community of practice. This one found in a case study. Social media served as the online platform for this COP, and there were tools that were implemented to try and develop each of the elements that are necessary for a COP that creates meaningful individual and group learning. That model also developed stages that a COP goes through as it creates knowledge. What's important about this is that this is what makes a COP different from an informal group of people that get together to share their experiences. This is a critical thing to understand, that COP leads to the formation of new meanings, understandings, and insights about the shared topic of interest. A literature review done by Abigail in 2016 attempted to examine what factors make a COP successful, what makes it effective in learning transfer, where the members actually improve their practices outside the community that they are engaged in. Through her literature review, she found many different factors. This slide shows the factors that contribute to success that are aligned with mlearning principles. One factor that I found surprising from this study that really had an impact on COPs and their effectiveness and their outcomes is how important face-to-face meetings are. And this had to do with establishing norms and inspiring people to continue to contribute throughout the life of the COP. A study done on teacher development using online COPs in Malaysia echoed the finding that face-to-face communications are an important element in establishing effective outcomes for community of practice. It emphasized the importance that trust and rapport needs to be fully established, which isn't always easy to do in an online platform. Another important finding had to do with authenticity, that communities of practice with tasks and learning experiences that lack authenticity often lose members throughout time and don't fully engage others. The potential for COPs in mlearning lie in the tools that mobile devices offer. They allow members to function with greater mobility and flexibility so that needs for learning can be met when and where they're needed, and it also allows for more flexible capacity to contribute to group learning because it is enabled when and where they find the opportunity. Finally, authenticity in COPs can be enhanced through mlearning because of the way it offers a bottom-up approach where the learners are driving the direction of the COP. The learners are guiding the learning process rather than it being handed from an authority above. The models that were introduced earlier in this presentation were strictly virtual communities of practice. The real promise, perhaps, for communities of practice in mlearning will come when the mobile-enabled tools support the framework of a COP rather than actually being the framework of the COP. Using mobile devices when it makes sense and when it furthers the goals of the community of practice is the key designing consideration. And there are many tools that are available to be used to support COPs. The gift of these tools is that it frees up the members of the communities of practice to actually work on their progress and to share what they're encountering and in learning in the world around them with their group members, their fellow community of practice members. You may have used some of these tools yourself. I've used Slack in an occasion where I worked in a group or team project. I'd be interested to hear some of your thoughts on how effective you think they are for promoting a community of practice. Finally, there are some questions that you might have. There certainly are some that I thought of as I was working on this. One of the studies that I cited was specifically geared towards faculty development. And so when you think about communities of practice in other fields, are some of the thoughts that I've presented today also applicable? Do you think that these things might be very field specific? Secondly, face-to-face interaction seems to be a very important factor in creating effective COPs. That makes it difficult to put everything in an electronic delivery. But I'm beginning to wonder, as I see other tools being developed, and we know that that will just continue, can face-to-face interaction eventually be something that's enabled electronically through innovative video tools? Video web conferencing currently gives such great definition to people's faces that gestures can be seen more clearly than ever before. And then also there are innovations in eye tracking glasses, Google Glass, GoPro cameras. Would those be tools that could effectively replace the things that are facilitated through face-to-face interaction? Finally, the field of knowledge in terms of the suitability of the COP also was something I wondered about. COPs do have the potential of spreading bad or incorrect knowledge. Are there any checks to this? Are there any ways to avoid this? These are some of that's one of the drawbacks to COPs as they apply to mlearning that need to be considered. One thing that I'd like you to think about too is, are there fields of knowledge that COPs and mlearning would apply to, and are there fields where perhaps you should avoid using COPs? Those are a couple of questions that I have for you. Thank you for listening to my presentation on communities of practice. This is a list of some of the sources that I used to create this presentation.